Hello everybody, this is Michelle Fox and welcome back to The Simple Quilter. As always, I'm glad to be here filming this video for all of you out there. Today's topic is a great topic. This is perhaps the fastest quilt I've ever put together. It's fun, it goes together quick. If you're needing to put together a quilt quickly, and I mean quickly, like within a week or a few days, this is the quilt that you need. And this quilt is very versatile. It can be used with panels, your favorite fabrics. You could even cut off the emblem of a t-shirt. You could cut this emblem off, put a stabilizer behind it, and this could be the center of your quilt. So today's quilt is a one-block log cabin quilt. The inspiration for my quilt was a quilt that I saw Cindy Rang display, and it just caught my attention, and I really wanted to make a quilt. And since then I made this quilt, and I'm going to be making a couple more, but I wanted to be sure to put this one together, and I did, and it was quick and easy, great results, and I will be making more of these fun quilts. Now this quilt was made using the Cultivate Kindness fabric line, including the panel, and I did cut up the panel and put some sashing in between here, and this kind of was the center of my one block quilt, and this is a one block log cabin quilt, and that was kind of the center. And I wanted to use red because red's the traditional color for the center of a log cabin quilt, but in the quilt I'm going to show you how to put together today, I'm not going to be using red, and I'm not going to be putting sashing between it. I'm just going to be using a panel. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I have pulled some fabrics from my stash to go with this quilt, and we're going to need, or I'm going to use 3 darks. You can use how many ever you want. This is just how I did it. You can use it, like I said, you can use whatever colors you want, whatever fabric selections that you want, but I did stick with 3 basic darks and then 3 lights for the quilt that I'll be making today and the one that I've showed you here. So we'll need 3, and my strips I cut 6 inches wide. Now you can do 6.5, you can use 5, you can use 5.5. I probably wouldn't go under 5.5 simply because I like big quilts, and that's why I chose 6 inches in width. So back to fabric selection. 3 basic mediums to darks, and then 3 lights. Now I do want to point out something about the lights. I do like this quilt, but far away you may be picking up on it on the camera, but the lights here, they coordinated well, and I thought they looked great, but at a distance, really almost any distance greater than 3 feet, these start to blend into each other because I selected all lights. So I would recommend a higher contrast with your lights, simply because far away it just looks like one big solid light tan piece or cream colored piece. Okay, Molly wanted to say hi. I have to just interject that because otherwise she's not going to stop woofing at me, and you're going to hear her woofing on the video. So are you ready, Molly? You think you can be down now without woofing at me now that you've had a little attention? Okay, so the fabric panel I'm going to be working with today is put out by Timeless Treasure. It's called Gone Fishing, and that's kind of what our family does. We like to fish and camp. We've been doing it since our kids were little. Wes and I absolutely love to go camping, and we're starting to get more into fishing again now that our kids are grown and it's just the two of us. Well, I guess I am. Wes has kind of always been into fishing. But anyway, this is the fabric panel I'm going to be using today to show you how to put this quilt together. Now, what I did when I went to my fabric stash, I just started pulling some fabrics based on the colors that I saw here. There's greens, there's tans, there's a little red, there's some orange and yellow, there's lots of black. It's really pretty dark, and I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but there's deer and fishing nets and stars. That's what I looked at before I started pulling the fabrics out. Now I'm going to do a close-up and I'm going to show you some of the fabrics I'm auditioning. Okay, so here's the panel. I don't know if you can see much of that. Let's see. You can see the little fire with the orange and the reds. There's orange and reds in one of the lures, some reds. I love the greens. I love all these colors. Okay, so these are the darks that I pulled from my selection. There's a batik. I love the oranges and yellows and reds. I think it picks up the colors in the fire there. Now, this is a fabric that I used in a quilt that I made for Jared, and I like it because it looks like the coloring on trout, so I really like that. I like this one too. It picks up some of the muted greens and the different greens in there, and then of course the black and red check. Now I really think I'm going to go with these simply because I like that there is a difference in the quilt, and there's a difference in each fabric, and none of these are reading a solid. So I think I'm going to go with these three and leave this one out. But I actually bought 2 of these panels, so I may make the quilt a second top using this one. Alright, so there are going to be my darks, and this is the order that I'm going to use them. Now I'm going to use them in this order because I don't have very much of this orange, and I'm going to have to piece some of it together. Alright, now let's take a look at these that I've selected for the other side. Now I showed you in the quilt that was hanging up that the lights together just kind of blend in and look like one big piece of fabric. So I'm going to try really hard not to do that. And I really like all of these fabrics, but I think I'm going to leave this one out because at a distance it reads as a solid, and I think these will give me more contrast. And I have to say, I was so excited to find this fabric in my stash. I was looking hard for something that had kind of a camping fishing theme, and I ran across that. So I wonder if that's put out by Timeless Treasures. No, this one's a Moda fabric. So these are the ones, and these are the ones I'm going to use, and I'm going to use them in this order. And again, I'm using this one because I don't have very much of it. So, and I really just have a couple of small pieces, and like I said, I'm going to have to piece it. So those are my fabric choices. Okay, now I have shown you how to square up panels, and I'll put a link up above to the video that I've shown you how to do that, but I am going to show you quickly how I squared up this panel, simply because this was a super easy panel to square up, and I had 2 of them, so I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Now before I get started, you know, I like selvages, and I just have to show you the selvage. Look at those cool fish. I definitely will be saving the selvages. So I will be cutting the selvages off. Now, these were on the bolt, these had lines where they were cut. And this is a good panel, this is good quality fabric, and these were very easy to square up. So, first thing, I've just matched up the selvages and I kind of shook it out. And so you can see it just lays really nice and smooth. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to cut off the selvages. I'm going to do that one side at a time. I'm going to cut those off because I don't want those in the quilt. Plus, I'm going to save them because I just love the selvages on this fabric. All right. Okay. And I'm going to be cutting off 1.5 inches just because I want to use these selvages. And you always do want to remove the selvages on your fabric, and I've talked to you about that before. And since I'm measuring from the selvage over, I know that these ends are straight. So I'm just going to line up these lines here. Line up that straight edge, and I'm just going to shake out my quilt. Shake it out. Okay, I'm going to trim a little of this off on the end, just to clean up that edge. And I know, because I've already squared up the other one, that I want this to be 23.5 inches. And I am going to use my mat. I'm going to line that up with my mat. I don't always do that. In fact, I don't do it just a ton. I really like to use my rulers better. But this is going to work because we're just squaring it up. It's lined up nicely. My material's laying good and flat. I have everything lined up here, and I'm just going to make a straight cut. 23.5 inches long. Now, I also know, because I just did the other one, that this one is going to be 20 3/4. And the fabric here is doubled over. I'm just going to double check that with my tape measure. Yep, got that lined up good. There we go. And that's just a quick and easy way to trim up the panel. Now this panel was easy. It wasn't all crooked and all. So if you're having difficulty with your panel and it's not crooked, be sure you check out the other video that I showed you, the video that I've linked above. Alright, I'm going to put this out of the way. That one's ready to go for my next quilt. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to press all my fabrics and I'm going to start cutting my strips, and I'm going to need 6.5 inch strips. I think I told you in the introduction I was going to do 6 inch, but I'm going to do 6.5 inch strips. So I'll press on my fabrics and I'll cut all of my fabrics. Now I know, because of the first quilt that I made, that on the pieces that will be on the outside of the quilt, I'm going to need anywhere from 3 to 4 strips. So when you're measuring out your fabrics, be sure that you have at least enough width for 4 strips on those outer strips. So if it's 6.5 inches, you're going to take 6.5 times 4 to get the yardage that you're going to need, or the number of inches. So that's going to be 26 inches, so you'll need at least 26 inches of fabric on those outer pieces. Okay, so now that I have my fabrics all pressed and my fabrics cut into 6.5 inch strips, this is how I get started doing this quilt. Now I measured exactly from here to here, and I knew that this was 23.5 inches. So that is what I cut this at, 23.5 inches. Then I folded it in half and I pressed it in half, and then right here I pressed it in half. And I will line these two up and pin those, and I'll sew on the first strip. So let me show you a little close-up of that. Okay, so I had to piece this because I only had small pieces, so that's why you're seeing a seam there. And I'm just going to line up the middle where I pressed it, so that I could see that. Then I'm just going to line these up, and I'm going to pin it. Pin it again. There's a fly in here. Now, it's important to pin this on and not just cut a piece, sew it on, and then cut it off. When you do that, you get this wavy effect in the first really border piece that you're going to add on. It'll be kind of wavy. So if you do it like this, that will eliminate that waviness. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine, sew my 1/4 of an inch, press it, and then press it open. And that will be my first piece. And then I'll show you how to add the additional pieces. Now, one little note on using a plaid, I just had little pieces, so I had to piece it. And if it's going to bother you, for those not to just look perfect, then I would avoid plaids or learn how to line those up. I'm not that great at lining those up, but remember, it doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. So let me get this sewn, and I'll show you how to add the next strip. Okay, so I have my first piece sewn on. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure the length of this side. That's 47 1/4. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. Now, it's important for me to measure as I go. I may pre-cut my strips as far as the width goes, but I don't pre-cut the length until after I've sewn on this piece and measured, because I want to have the correct length to add. I don't want any extra, I don't want any less. Now, when I pressed this, I pressed it in half, and then I folded in half again so that the fourth, it's pressed into fourths. And I'll do the same thing in my next piece. Then when I line those up, I'll line those up and pin like that. So let me get this next piece cut and pressed, and then I'll show you again how I pin that on. Okay, so here we are with the next piece that needs to be added, and I just want to show you quickly how I did this. Okay, I laid it, folded it in half, and I pressed it. Then I folded it in half again, and I pressed it again to give me marks to line up with the one with the piece here. There's the middle, so lay, pin the middle. And there's the fourth mark. And then the end. And then I'll just go ahead, do this to the other end and pin this really good, just like this. Same thing here. I'm just going to keep pinning till that's all pinned, and then I'll sew it on and I will press it open. Okay, so you can see I've got the second strip added, and I like it. I'm liking this fabric up against this one. So then I'm going to start at the bottom with the yellowish orange, and I'll sew one strip on across the bottom, then one up to the top, then I'll switch back to the lights down, and I'm just going to keep doing that same process until I have all of the pieces added. Okay, so the next strips have been added, and I have to say I'm loving this orange. Right now it's reminding me a little bit of Halloween, but I'm hoping when I get the other pieces on it's going to look more like camping. Okay, so I am going to add some more strips, maybe all of them, and I will show you the final result. Okay, so I've added another light and dark, another dark, two darks on the bottom, the lights on the top, and I'm liking it. I know this is kind of a big zinger and it's really popping out, but I think I'm going to keep going. I'm a little concerned because there's just a couple of places in here that have yellow and orange, but I really like this fabric, and one of my favorite things about camping is having a campfire. And this definitely reminds me of the campfire, and also we like to go in the fall, and this reminds me of fall. So I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to add the next 4 strips. And okay, now I have to say, I am loving this quilt. It just resonates camping. I just love it. I love the outcome. Now this quilt took me maybe, after I picked the fabric and cut the strips, maybe 4 or 5 hours. Quick and easy, super, super fun, and I really like the outcome of this one. This one's definitely going to be going in our camper. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. Share with a friend, and as always, have fun quilting.